welcome to Thrive. Whether you are joining us online or in person, we're so glad you're here. If you're in the room, would you please stand with us and get ready to worship?
Wandering into the night, wanting a place to hide this weary soul, this bag of bones. I try with all my might, but I just can't win the fight. I'm slowly drifting, a vagabond.
Lord, come and fill this place. Father, we're crying out. Spirit, we need you now. Glorious love surrounds us. Lord, come and fill this place.
You know, there's a line in that song that says, there is a hope that washes the fear away. And I don't know if you are like me, but when I look around and see everything that is going on in the world today, it makes me think that fear is the devil's weapon of choice right now. He knows that if he can take our focus off of Jesus and cause us to look to what is going on to the left and the right of us, he can fill us with fear and heaviness. But the good news is that Jesus never takes his focus off of us. We may look to the left and the right at the chaos, but all we have to do is come back to center, and we will see him laser focused on us, ready to feel that fear with hope. So during this next song, we are going to have our prayer partners come, and if you need prayer today, if you're struggling with a physical ailment or a depression, or you just need hope, please come forward for prayer. And if you don't need prayer today, please listen to the words of this next song, and just let that hope wash over you, knowing that Jesus is your champion.
I've tried so hard to see it. It took me so long to believe it. That you choose someone like me to carry your victory. Perfection could never earn it. You give what we don't deserve it. You take the broken and raise them to glory. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all. Now I can finally see it. You're teaching me how to receive it. So let all the striving cease. Oh, this is my victory. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you won. I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all. You've conquered it all, Jesus. I am who you say I am. Jesus, Jesus. 'Cause when I lift my voice and shout, every wall comes crashing down. I have the authority. Jesus has, and when I open up my mouth, miracles start breaking out. I have the authority. Oh, Jesus has given me. And when I lift my voice and shout, every wall comes crashing placed on us in this world, good and bad. There were a lot of us in the room that felt unworthy, incapable, weak. And as I was singing this today, and I sang out, I am who you say I am, I felt like there's somebody in the room that needs to know that you are who he calls you, not who this world calls you. You are strong, you are capable, you are worth it, and you have that in you, and you have the authority to speak the truth over that, over your life. You can let go of the labels that this world has placed on you and grab hold of the truth of who God calls you to be and how he created you. In Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5, it says, before you were formed in your mother's womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. A lot of times we sing songs and the words just kind of feel like words we say because they maybe don't make sense. But this song says, I have the authority. When I lift my voice and shout, walls start breaking down. Those walls of lies of what this world tells us we are, of the pain of this world, so that the truth of who God calls us to be can shine through. So today, I'm going to have you sing that chorus with me one more time and recognize and be encouraged in this moment that you are who he calls you to be, and you have the authority to speak that over your life. You are strong, you are capable, you are valued, you are worth it no matter what this world or the people around you tell you. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. Come on, I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated. By the power of your name, I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all.
Would you pray with me this morning? Dear Jesus, thank you for the hope, and thank you for the authority that you give us to claim victory in your name no matter what we are facing today. God, please open our hearts to hear everything that you have for us during this time. In your name we pray. Amen. Guys, did you see the inflatables when you came in? It looked fun. It is Thrive Kids Ninja Warrior Sunday. Now, I thought about going out there and trying to be a part of that, but I don't think they're going to let me do it because I don't know a lot about Ninja Warriors. But I'm a child of the 80s, so I know a lot about Ninja Turtles. So on your way to your seat this morning, turn to your neighbor and tell them, who's your favorite Ninja Turtle? Donatello? Michelangelo? Where's the music? Well, good morning once again, guys. My name is Summer Cotton, and I'm the Adult Ministries Director here at Thrive. So glad that you're here today, and I'd like to give a special welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. If you're in the room with us today for the first time, you should have received a free gift on your way in. If you didn't, please stop by the purple tent on your way out and let us put that gift in your hand and say hello. You know, one of our goals here at Thrive is to be guest obsessed, and not in a creepy way. Don't worry, I'm not going to stalk your social media or chase you to your car today. No, that simply means that we want to connect with you. We want to have a conversation. We want to know all about you. We want to hear about your kids. We want to hear about your dogs. We want to hear about where you are in your walk with Jesus. But most importantly, we want to know how we can come alongside you and support you as a church. So I am going to ask you to do one thing for me real quick today. Whether you're online or whether you're in the room, take your phone out for me. And if it's your first time, second time, or third time, I'm going to ask you to text the word CONNECT to 832-345-1960 and let us connect with you. And if you're online, our hosts are dropping that number in the chat right now. And if you send me that text, we're going to send you a little something in the mail. Whether it is your first time here looking for a little more information about Jesus because you're just trying to figure out this whole faith thing. We would love to put some information in your hand about that. Or whether you're new to the area and your family's looking for a place to call home. We would love to talk to you about our life groups and our teams and our on-ramp process. So send that text today and let us connect with you. Fall is a fun time at Thrive, y'all. We have so many cool things going on right now. So y'all check out the screens, and Abby's going to tell you all about it.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Thrive. My name is Abby, and on behalf of our pastors, our staff, and our incredible volunteers, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. If you're new here at Thrive and you've never been to our welcome party, then mark your calendars. Sunday, October 3rd is just for you. Our welcome party is an opportunity for you to get to know our pastors, some of our volunteers, and to get to know other people that are in the church and that are new, just like you. This is a great way to learn about the culture and the vibe of our church and to get some free food. We really hope that you'll join us. One of the things that I love about Thrive is we don't have members, we have partners. And if you're interested in learning more about that, then join us for On-Ramp. This is a two-step pathway to partnership called Find and Follow. And spaces are limited, but don't worry, we'll be offering this every month. Thrive exists to make it easy for people to find and follow Jesus. And we're able to do that because of your generosity. For those of you that give to Thrive Church, thank you so much. We could not do what we do here without you. And for those of you that are interested in giving, there's several ways that you can do that. For those of you that are joining us online, you can click the link in the chat. And for those of you here in the room, you can scan the QR code on the seat back in front of you. You may notice when you scan that QR code that our giving platform looks a little bit different. We're transitioning to a new platform to enable your gifts to go further and to make it easier for you. For those of you that are recurring givers, you can transition your gifts over to the new platform as well. Thank you guys for your generosity. Now it's time for week 2 of our current series, XO Makers and Breakers. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the service.
They say love is more precious than gold, can't be bought and it can't be sold. I got love enough to spare, that makes me a millionaire. Living in luxury, real luxury. Said love is more precious than gold. It can't be bought, no, and it can't be sold. I got love and love to share, that makes me a millionaire. When the kisses fall from everywhere, life reaches on, millionaire. makes me a millionaire.
Growing up, my dad loved to drive down the road blasting songs, a lot like that one that you just heard, and just playing it on the radio loud. And what was cool is one of the cars we got to drive when we were younger, it wasn't ours, it belonged to my uncle, but we got to drive it really often, was this 1972 orange convertible Corvette. I mean, it was hot. It was looking good. It was amazing. And what's really funny about it is I was a little kid at the time when we were driving this thing around, and my dad would be in the front seat, and my older brother, who's 10 years older than me, would be in the passenger seat, and I would be stuffed in the cubby, like in between, like where you would put maybe a briefcase or something. Like I would curl myself up in there in the center, and we would just go driving down the highway. And what's interesting about that is for like 2 years after that, I could tell people, like, no, Corvettes, they definitely have a back seat. Like, I sat in it all the time, and people be like, there's only 2 seats in a Corvette. I'm like, no. My dad always put me in the back seat, and I didn't realize until a few years later that, no, he was just stuffing me in this little cubby hole that definitely wasn't meant to hold a child or a human being or was very safe in the moment. Fast forward a few years, my brother gets a little bit older, and he doesn't get to drive the Vette. But you know what my dad goes out and buys? He goes out and grabs a 1978 Firebird T-Top. I mean, this thing was beautiful, a V8, 6-liter engine. I mean, this thing, it was a power horse. This thing could go so fast, and I remember hearing my brother, like, peel out of the driveway and down the street. In fact, he did that so often that he ended up blowing up the engine in this thing just a few years after he got it. And so my dad learned a lesson in that moment, like, let's not get the teenagers crazy cars. And so when I came of age, I was like, man, we had the Vette, we got the Firebird, like, what kind of car am I going to get? I got a 1989 used, beat-up, beautiful Beretta. I'm thinking, Dad, come on, man. Like, surely I can get something a little bit better than this. Surely there's something that's better for me. In fact, what you don't see in this image is my Beretta had the ceiling panel was like falling down. And so in order to take girls out on dates and stuff, I had to like pin it back up with like pins to get it to stay there. It had a digital dashboard on it. The problem is the backlighting didn't work. And so it was only when the sun hit it just right, I could actually see the speed that I was going. And I was like, man, I wish I had a much cooler car. I wish I had something that was like rocking and so great. I wish I had a dashboard that actually worked. In fact, I wish I had a dashboard. You know what the coolest dashboard in the world ever was? You guys remember Knight Rider? You guys remember KITT? Here's the dashboard of KITT. This was the greatest dashboard. This was the car that I wanted, had it all, had all this stuff going on and all the lights and all the things, and I thought it was going to be the greatest ever, and that was not my dashboard. I never got to have a car with a dashboard like that. And today we're in the midst of our series called XOXO, where we're looking at marriages and relationships, and one reason why we look at dashboards is to try to understand what's going on with our car. How are we gauging it? How do we make sure we don't get into issues and problems? How do we make sure we see what's coming in front of us and we know that we have to fill certain tanks and keep things in certain ways so that we operate correctly? And during our series, XO, Makers and Breakers, we're looking at how relationally we might be able to do the same thing. Not wait until our marriages are destroyed, but say, man, how do I help prevent that from happening? Or when our marriages do feel broken, is there a way to even restore them? So today, we're going to talk about those dashboard warnings, those gauges that you have in your relationship, similar to like those that you have in the car, to say, man, how do we look at these gauges and try to understand and try and comprehend, like, where are we at? Like, what's going on with our relationships? What's going on with my marriage? What's going on with myself? How am I gauging myself? Because oftentimes at night we fantasize about sweet, dreamy cars. Like we fantasize like one day I'm gonna drive Knight Rider. I'm gonna drive that kit car and it's gonna be amazing. One day I'm gonna drive that 2021 Chrysler Pacifica minivan, and it is gonna be amazing. You see, my dreams are a little different than yours. I grew up with I love minivans. But no, we dream and fantasize of cars. And we dream and we fantasize of maybe finding the right person, but we often don't dream about becoming the right person, about being who God called us to be as a husband or as a wife or as a friend or a neighbor. So today we're going to say, man, how do we look at the dashboards of our lives and check the gauges and see the warning lights to make sure we don't go down these pitfalls? How do we have thriving relationships in our world? And oftentimes we don't want to look at those dashboards. We don't want to look at the warning lights because we're afraid that our dashboard's going to look like this. Maybe your car's dashboard does look like this, where all the lights are on. All of it's crazy. You don't even know what they mean. They're just on. You're like, I don't know what this says. It's a spouty thing. Get coffee. I don't know what it is that it's telling me to do. And you're afraid that maybe your relationships in your life is going to look like this if you try and check the gauges. But let me tell you, now is the time to do it. Today is the day to do something different in your world and in your life, so that you can start to live the life that God has called you toward, so that you can start to be in the relationship that God has called you toward. That doesn't mean you need to change up partners. It probably means you need to change up your perspective and change up what you're doing in your relationship. So how do we start to check the gauges? The thing is, man, 50% of, you guys know this stat, 50% of marriages end up long-lasting, with people like going and making the distance, right? Oftentimes we focus on the 50% that get divorced, but 50% are long-lasting and going. How do we make sure we go into that category in our life and not just have a boring marriage, like, oh, we're together still, I guess. How do we have an exciting marriage? How do we have a marriage that we want to be a part of, a relationship that says, man, I love what's going on here. We don't always have it all together. We still argue and get in fights. But this person makes me better. I love being with this person. So how do we prepare ourselves? How do we prepare ourselves? Because saying I do doesn't really make you capable. It's really easy to say I do. That doesn't mean you're capable, it just means you're accountable. All right, when you say I do, all you need like a promise at a party, and that's it. That's all you need to say I do. And oftentimes we think that, well, once I get married, once we start living together, once we start doing this thing together, it's all going to fall into place. And we don't recognize that those promises don't make us capable, they just make us accountable. So today we're going to talk about how do we create some capabilities in our life as we walk through our relationships. There's a foundational verse when it comes to relationships and how we interact with each other. You see, Jesus, he was talking with his disciples. And as he was getting ready to leave them, as he was getting ready to die on the cross and to be risen again and to ascend into heaven, he leaves them with one command. That's right, one command. Like Old Testament, they had like 600. You got the 10 commandments. Jesus himself was like the two greatest, love God, love people, and then he boils it down to one in the end. And we find in John 15:12 where he just simply says this, my command is this. Love one another as I have loved you. That's it. That's it. It's simple, but it's not simplistic. And how do you love other people like Jesus loved you? Well, you got to recognize he didn't call you to love other people the way that you want to love them. He called you to love other people the way that he loves you, the way that he loves other people. And that's why Paul's one of the writers of about half the New Testament, that second half of your Bible. And he writes all these letters and he writes all these imperatives about living a life as a Jesus follower. In all the imperatives that he gives, he always falls back to this one thing. And you'll hear him all the time say, as Jesus said, as Jesus showed us, just like Christ did for us. you heard Jesus say, and he always goes right back to this one thing: how are we loving as Jesus loved us? And how do we get to do that more? And how do we understand that more? We understand Jesus more. And when we get to know him better, we recognize how to love better. There's going to be some warning signs when we're not doing that, when we're doing things our own way. There's going to be some gauges that you're going to need to check. You're going to need to look at that dashboard and say, how are we gauging? How are we doing in these areas? Are we headed for trouble or not? In fact, Paul talks about love, probably one of the most famous verses in all of history. And Paul, as he's thinking through how Jesus explained himself and explained what we're to do and commanded us to do in loving each other, Paul, with that in mind, goes on to write in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, love is patient. You've heard this before. You've read this before. In fact, you're probably already ahead of me on this, and you're like, oh, I know a lot more than that. I know all sorts of things he says about love, but let's just be patient. He says, man, love doesn't decide to go at your pace. Love chooses to go at someone else's pace. He says there's moments in life that your partner's at a pace that maybe you need to slow down and to match up with them, and you need to recognize, like, no, I need to be patient in this moment with it. Or maybe you need to be patient in the way that you need to speed up with them. They're going, and you got to say, okay, I'm going to be with you. All right. But oftentimes, we need to look at our patience gauge. We need to see what speed are we going? How are we interacting with others? You see, it's a decision to pause often rather than to push. It's a decision to defer often to someone else or to your spouse or to your loved one. And oftentimes, Paul talks about that a lot, the idea of deferring to another, considering others better than yourselves, considering others over yourself in the moment, being patient with them. And why does he do this? Not because it's a new idea, not because it's something he came up with, but because that's what Jesus did for us. And so if our call is to simply reflect Jesus, then we need to be patient as well, because Jesus has been patient with our pace. He's been patient with my pace. He's been patient with me in the moments where he's slowed down with me. And he's walked with me in the moments when I didn't have it all together. In the moments where I've tripped up and fallen. In the moments where I've said stuff I know I shouldn't have said. He's stuck with me. He's been patient with me to walk me through. And one of the gauges in our relationships, and especially in our marriages, that we need to check and check often is the patience gauge, because love is patient. So how are we doing at our pace? To go the distance, you have to exercise this muscle. You know, one of the good ways to exercise this muscle? Driving. You get behind that person, right, then you are not patient. It doesn't matter where you need to go, you need to get there faster. And there's that person in front of you that is going slow, and they're not moving over, and they're not changing lanes, and they're sticking you right there, and you're just like, come on. And it's not a life and death situation, it's Chipotle that you need to get to. And that's the moment, man. Sometimes I say, all right, maybe here I can check my gauge, practice my patience. Maybe there's a moment with your spouse. Stuff is revving up, things are going. You're getting ready to get into that argument or into that fight, or things are happening, and you check the gauge. You say, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is a moment I can practice my patience. That's not all that Paul says. That's just the beginning, though. He begins by saying love is patient. Then he goes on. You know what he says? He says, and love is kind. There's a kindness gauge that we got to look at in our life. The kindness gauge is kind of like the critical meter. Like, are we being kind or are we being critical? Do you find yourself being a fan of your spouse, or do you find yourself being a big critic of your spouse? Let me tell you, this is a difficult one for me. This is one I need to speak into my life consistently. I have a hard time not being a critic. And you know who catches it the most? The one I'm closest to. My wife, Kristen. And I've got to stand back and I've got to recognize that kindness is something I've got to work on. It's a muscle I've got to see. It's a gauge I've got to look at and recognize and understand. Am I being kind or am I being critical? You see, kindness, sometimes it can sound soft. It can sound weak. Like, oh, kindness. Like, I don't know, that's not a big, like, manly thing to do. Like, that doesn't sound strong and empowering. But it is. You see, the weakness is when you lack the self-control to keep your mouth shut or to say positive things. When stuff just starts coming out, like, I don't know, I'm just saying it because it's truth. That's a weakness when you can't hold that in or hold that back. It's a strength instead to be kind. There's a quote I had on my phone for a couple of years to try and remind me of this. It's a quote from Andy Stanley. He's an author and a pastor in Alpharetta, Georgia. And he defines kindness this way. It's incredible. He says, kindness is loaning someone your strength instead of reminding them of their weakness. It hits me every time. It hits me every time because Josh, this guy up here, he didn't do a good job at this all the time. I oftentimes love to point out weaknesses and say, no, we got to fix that. We got to change that. We got to do this. We got to get better at things. And instead of looking at my kindness meter, saying, no, am I loaning you my strength instead of reminding you of your weakness? I mean, that's what we celebrate. That's what we come in here and sing about all the time, is the idea that, like, that's what God does for us. We tell him, like, we're weak, God, we need your strength. And he comes and he gives us strength. He is kind to us. Kindness is not a weakness. How are you doing at that gauge? How are you doing in that world with your spouse? Are you leaning toward critical or are you leaning toward kind? Kindness is doing for others what they can't do for themselves. Kindness is love's response to weakness. I mean, look what Jesus did for us. Romans 5:8 says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. When we turn our backs on him, when we completely ignore him, he's still kind to us. He loaned us his strength in the middle of our weakness. So what's your go-to response in the weakness of others? Let me tell you, if you're dating someone right now and their go-to response in the weaknesses of others, maybe not to you, maybe they're kind to you because you're dating right now and they want to be kind, they want to get something out of it, but if you see that their response to others and their weakness is being critical instead of being kind, it might be time to break that off. It might be time to go find someone else, because let me tell you, there's going to be a moment in your life and in your marriage or in your relationship as you move forward that they're going to start getting critical of you, and lets you change that now. And if you're married here in the room today, don't go anywhere. This is where you're going to look at your own gauges and look at yourself and say, how do I become kind instead of critical? See, Paul goes on here. Not only does he say love is patient, we have a patience gauge, and love is kind, and we've got a kindness gauge, but then he says, man, it does not envy, it doesn't boast, and it isn't proud. Now, there's a humility gauge that we've got to look at. There's this kind of pride meter. How am I doing with that? How am I doing in my pridefulness? Do I let others shine, or do I always try to take the spotlight? See, love isn't threatened by other people's success. Love celebrates other people's success. How well do you do with that? How well do you do when someone starts spouting to you the success that they're having in life and celebrating with them? And maybe it's not just celebrating with them. Not inserting yourself into their celebration is what you've done as well. Say, oh yeah, you've done that? Well, I did that too. Well, growing up, in high school, I got a medal for, well, you did this? Oh, in my job, I did that. And suddenly you insert yourself there, and sometimes it's unconscious because these things have to be intentional. When they're not intentional, we're always going to drift toward the unloving thing and the selfish thing and the prideful thing. But when we're intentional, we recognize, no, how do I intentionally respond to let that person shine and not make it about me, but make it about them? To listen. That's a big part of loving. And there's a time for response. There's a time to share, and there's a time to get together and to say, oh yeah, we have commonalities, and to connect in that way, but it's not the time to try to steal the spotlight. How do we not be boastful or proud or envious? And if you don't feel good about yourself, it's really difficult to let others feel good about themselves. So this is, again, one of those gauges where you've got to look in at your own life. How are you doing? How are you feeding yourself? How are you growing yourself? How are you moving forward so that you can get this gauge correct? So that you're not constantly looking over at the others with envy and boastful or proud in your own direction. Pay close attention to your internal reaction at the success of others. This is a very intentional thing that we have to do. Husbands, how easy is it for you to brag on your wife? Wives, how easy is it for you just to speak up about the great things or talk positive about your husband, to allow them to shine? How are you doing looking at your pride meter, your humility gauge? See, Paul goes on and he says this. Also, love does not dishonor others. This final gauge that we're going to look at today. Love does not dishonor others. The honor gauge, this whole selfishness meter. Love doesn't dishonor, it doesn't disgrace, it's not indecent, it honors other people. And we know how to do this. We know how to honor other people. And the reason I know that we all know how to do this is because if I asked you to name an artist or an actor or an athlete that you love, that you want to go and have dinner with, and you get invited exclusively to go and have a meal or sit down or talk or grab coffee and just have some one-on-one time with this artist or actor or athlete, you got them in mind, I'm sure. And you're like, oh, Mr. Hanks, woo, Tom Hanks is coming. We're going to hang out. Do you know what you would do? Do you know what you do? You would honor them. You would get ready. You'd be prepared. You'd be excited. You'd have questions ready. You'd get yourself ready. You'd make sure things are all good and going on. You'd get to the restaurant early. You'd make sure you had a good seat. You'd go and you'd sit down. And if Tom showed up like 15 minutes late, you ain't going to go, oh, Mr. Hanks, like, you can't do this to me, man. You're going to be 15 minutes late. We ain't going to hang out. Like, I'm not going to let you wait. No, you know what you would do? Oh, Mr. Hanks, it's okay. It's okay. It's an honor for me to be with you. It's an honor to have you here today. No, it's okay. It's okay. You can be a little late. You can do that. And we give honor, and you would give honor, and I would give honor to someone I've never met, someone I don't even know. And then oftentimes in our closest relationships, we don't choose honor. We don't look for positive intent. How are you doing on your honor gauge? Are you being intentional to choose honor in those moments? Are you being intentional to honor those that are around you, especially those closest to you, especially your spouse? See, because when we check these gauges, the patience gauge, the kindness gauge, the humility gauge, the honor gauge, when we look at these gauges, this is how you become a person worth looking for. For those of you that are married, this is how you become a person worth staying for. How are we doing here? This is challenging stuff. We've gone through like 15 words, and it's super challenging. It makes us really think about how are we treating others? How are we looking at this? How are we going to help move our marriage, our relationships forward to love people like Jesus loves us? And here's the thing, you don't drive around, you shouldn't drive around town checking other people's gauges. You don't drive in your car and you're trying to like get out the window, drive with your foot, look around, and check out the cars next to you's gauges. That would be dangerous. That would get you into an accident. That's going to get you into a car wreck. That's going to cause tension and explosions and chaos. The same is true in your life. Don't walk around telling other people about their gauges. There might be moments and times for that when you can have some dialogue around that, but your focus should be on yours. What are your gauges doing? How are you operating in this way? And let me tell you, there's going to be some dashboard lights that are going to come on. Sometimes when you look down and you check your gauges and you recognize what's going on here, you might see some flashing lights that are going to help you tell you that, like, oh, things aren't right. Things might not be going as well as I thought, or I knew this was going, I knew that light was going to be on. There's going to be some dashboard warning lights that are they're going to tell you your gauges are out of whack a little bit. And 4 quick ones are simply this. If there's a lack of laughter in your relationship, that's a dashboard warning light. Say, whoa, I got to check my gauges. I got to check these things. I need to get these in order, because if there's a lack of laughter, we're not having fun. And let me tell you, marriage should be fun. You might see a dashboard warning light of constant criticism. If there's a lack of laughter, and if there's constant criticism, that is a warning light in your life. There might be a warning light of a surplus of secrets. I don't want to tell them. I'm not going to tell them. And suddenly you see this drifting apart that happens in that moment. Or maybe a warning light of a scarcity of sex. If you see these dashboard warning lights that are going off, there's something that's going on in the gauges that you have. There's something that's happening in how you're interacting and loving your spouse. And this is that moment when it's okay to call for some roadside assistance. Call for some help. It's okay to get into a place where someone's going to help fix you up when you can't do it on your own. It's amazing how we're totally okay going to help and financial advisors. We're okay for going to help when it comes to our cars or our work or our technical issues or our golf swing. But so often when it comes to our marriages and relationships, we're so scared of getting the help that we need, of walking in and saying, man, let's go to some counseling. Let's figure this out. Well, honey, we're not on the verge of getting a divorce or anything. I know, but I know we need some help. I know we can do better. Let's figure out a book that we can read together. Let's get into a life group where we're going to talk about marriages together. We've got a life group that meets here on Wednesday nights called Focus. In Summer, you saw her up here, our adult ministries director. She actually is one of those that helps lead that group. And they meet up here on Wednesday nights when our students are here. They're meeting back in the Rise room. And they just come together. And it's a place that right now they're talking about the weekend messages. And it's an opportunity for you maybe to just talk about your marriage, talk about what God's doing in your marriage or through your marriage, or how you can better your marriage. How do you go and get some help if your gauges are off? Or how do you choose to say, man, I'm going to work on my marriage, even if it feels good? Doesn't matter if you have a happy marriage or a boring marriage or a broken marriage. There's always places where we can go to move the ball forward. So check the gauges. Check your gauges of patience and kindness and humility and honor. Why? It's not because your partner is the most deserving, but it's because this is how we fulfill the command that Jesus gives to us, to love others as he has loved us. And watch as you start to put this into place, into your life and into your marriages, into your relationships, into your friendships. Watch how things get more fun. They get more interesting. There's better growth. Your atmosphere changes. Your perspective changes. When you see those people and you're like, man, I wish I could be like that. I wish I had relationships like that. I wish I could just be. I promise you, those people are intentional. They don't always have it all together. They're not perfect. There's fighting, there's chaos and craziness that goes on, but they're intentional. So today we have a choice. Are we going to be intentional, or are we just going to let it coast? Are we going to ignore the dashboard? We don't want to look at it. We don't want to see it. We don't want to know. This week, today, choose to check your gauges. Choose to be intentional about your relationships. Pray with me today. God, we come to you today so grateful that here in this space and place, we honor you by learning how to love better. So God, let us not walk away from here without recognizing how we can do that. And God, let us recognize how much you love us. that you are a God that is for us, and you call us to be for those that are around us. Jesus, help us to see clearly the places that we need to walk into personally and up our game in our relationships, to change our minds when it comes to how we're treating others, to be patient and to be kind and to be humble and to honor, to reflect you, Jesus. There's someone in the room today that's here. Maybe you're online with us and you want to come into a relationship with Jesus. You want to serve a God that treats you this way. You want to serve a God that loves you like this. If that's you today and you're here in the room or you're online, it's simple to follow after Jesus. It doesn't take any magic words or a magic moment. It simply is you choosing in your heart and praying a prayer of belief to say, God, I believe you are who you say you are. I believe that Jesus came as God in flesh, and he died and he rose again for the salvation of my sins, because I am a sinner in need of a Savior, and sin has kept me separated from God. And through Jesus, I can be reconnected to my Creator. And if that's you today, and you want to say yes to Jesus, online there's a link in the chat that you can click on to have someone walk with you. If you're here in the room today and you want to say yes to Jesus, come and see me at the Purple Tent afterwards right outside, and I'd love to have a conversation about how to move you forward in your faith. But Jesus, for all of us in the room here today, let us take a next step in our walk and continue to learn how to love like you love us. We love you today, Jesus. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Well, a couple things before we get out of here today. One is this: if you want to work on your marriage a little bit, and I don't mean because your marriage is going south, maybe you've got a great marriage, or maybe you do need a little bit of help. We've got something coming up, a marriage weekend coming up in 2 weeks that you're not going to want to miss. Check this out. If you want to rock your marriage, we've got a marriage weekend event coming up in 2 weeks that you can go online and register for right now. We've got an incredible couple, Justin and Trisha Davis, that are going to be coming in and sharing their story for those 2 days of this event. You are not going to want to miss it. It's going to be a great opportunity for you to build your marriage, whether it's happy, boring, or broken. Come and rock your marriage. Hey, would you stand with me today? As we get out of here today, you're going to find some inflatables out there. Some kids are going to be playing on them. Feel free to throw some hatchets. Feel free to do some bags and have some fun today as you walk out of here growing in your relationships. Hey, we'll see you guys next week, Thrive. Have a great weekend.